Hello, everyone. It is time again for Live with CCO. We're at episode 102. I'm excited you're here with us today. Uh, One of the topics that comes up from time to time that I really enjoy is uh, talking to people about what can they do with their credential, their coding credential as a medical coder, or maybe they've been in medical coding for a while and they're ready to try something new. What opportunities are out there. I love to talk about this for one thing, and that is because there is a vast number of things that you can actually do with your credential or with the experience that you've built up as you're getting credentialed and the education that you've had, or that just working in the field to say the past experience that you have to get that coding job. We often talk about how sometimes you just got to get your foot in the door. Anything you've done to make you better at your job or sustain you through transitions in your job will open up doors and opportunities in other areas. Or maybe you're looking for an opportunity in another area. Like I said before, you've been doing it for a little while and you think, I'm ready for something new. Or you're just getting your credential and you think, I thought it would be different than this. Is there other things that I can possibly do? Can I move up a ladder in this career? Well, by looking at 5 types of popular medical coding roles in healthcare, we're going to tell you some ways that you can think outside the box. Maybe you don't realize these roles are available out there. Now, I can tell you, just heads up, you know how much I love risk adjustment. That would be another role, is to get into specialty credentials or work in an avenue like risk adjustment. That would be my number one thing that I would tell people. However, we talk about that a lot, and we've talked about it in the past. And the other role that we've talked about is tumor registry. If you're not familiar with that, if it's not out on YouTube, you could definitely go look at the CCO Club, and that lecture would be there. Tumor registry is a lot of fun. They use the ICD-10 codes as well as other codes to build on neoplasms and cancers. Because of that, um, it is kind of a sister type career, but it's very different. And I happen to know that the age of most tumor registers, they're starting to age out. They're wanting to retire, and so there's a huge need for that. So I did not pick that in my 5 because we talked about them before. I wanted to go kind of outside the box and look at some areas where uh, you might not have thought of before. First of all, we do have to think about what medical coding does. It is actually a crucial role in the healthcare industry. If you're watching or listening on our podcast and had not, you're thinking, well, is this a career I want to get into? The purpose today is to tell you, yes, this is an exciting career. And don't think that if you know somebody that's a medical coder and that you would be doing necessarily what they're doing. There's a diverse amount of things that you can do, different entities that you can work for. But as far as what a medical coder does, they are translators. They translate the documentation that the provider gives into a code set. And one of the phrases that I say over and over again, if you've been with CCO for very long, you'll know this, is we code for statistical purposes. It happens to be a convenient way to get paid. I say that so often, I hope I get credit for it. Somebody else quotes me someday. It'll tickle me to death. It's true. We translate that documentation into a standard code set, and then that code set is used for statistics. It is also used to fill out and submit to payers for reimbursement. So we're dealing with billing, insurance claims, data analysis, all of those. There's behind the scenes business side of medicine as well as the clinical side of medicine we touch as medical coders. The roles that we do, again, uh, most of the time people think of reimbursement, but we also are involved in making sure that there's accurate medical records and documentation is being done properly. Compliance and regulatory requirements are touch us in the role of a medical coder, and the profession is growing. Now, we have also recently done lectures on how AI will affect um, our role, our careers, and we've also even had recent lectures done on ICD-11 as it changes and morphs into a new code set. There's multiple organizations you can align yourself with to be a medical coder. And I'm going to pump out a lot of content regarding different organizations and credentials as we talk about some of the roles that you can these 5 roles that I've picked. Typically, when we think of coders, it's divided up into 2 areas. You have an inpatient coder and an outpatient coder. Uh, if you talk to somebody that's a coder, then that's what I would ask them. Are you an inpatient coder or an outpatient coder? Probably 90% of the time, they're going to be outpatient coders. There's more opportunities in outpatient coders, coding, the outpatient coding arena, I guess I should say. And for inpatient coders, uh, it's not that there isn't a need for them. The fact is there's not as many jobs for inpatient coders, and on top of that, they need to have more experience usually under their belt before a facility will take a chance on hiring them. It's more detailed work, a lot more documentation to look through, and there's a lot more money involved, especially if you make a mistake. Now, that again doesn't mean that you can't start out as an inpatient coder. I've made statements like that before, and as our roles in society changes in the medical field, things are well, first of all, I would have said 10 years ago you would never start out as a remote coder, and now that's pretty obsolete. A lot of people start out as new coders in the remote world. And so I have to backtrack what I said. Well, again, times change. The difference between an inpatient and outpatient coder, again, we're still doing the same thing. We're coding for statistical purposes and getting reimbursed for that. We're reading the documentation, we're translating it into a code set. But the difference is an inpatient coder works for a facility, usually a hospital, and an outpatient coder works for everybody else. Outpatient coders tend to be um, if you get an outpatient coding credential or a core coding credential, you're probably an outpatient coder. Can you do inpatient coding with an outpatient coding credential? Yes, you can, especially if you have experiences. And now there are credentials specifically for inpatient, whereas there wasn't as many in the past. Now we're going to get into different roles. The 5 roles that I picked are pretty exciting. Uh, I did make the font a little bit smaller on these slides because there was so much information that I wanted to get to you. And hopefully, this is a launching board for you to do investigating on your own to see if what I say today triggers your interest, and then you do some more research. Compliance officer. This is a really exciting role, one that I think's fun. However, it may not be for everybody. Do know that as we go through each of these roles, I'm going to talk a little bit about the education requirements and also additional certifications that you might need for this particular role. Maybe not in the beginning for some of these, but eventually you may want to pick up another certification. That being said, let me just take a little sidebar and state that sometimes with your your coding certification, it gets you in the door, and you are not in a leadership role in one of these 5 that I'm going to talk about. However, they will your employer, especially if they like you and you do a good job, they will offer to pay for you to get additional certifications as you move up the ladder. So, compliance officer is an excellent transition for a coder. You may even decide this will be the arena that you want to go into. I still encourage everybody to work in coding for a while because that builds up the experience. It makes you better both being a biller and a coder in all of the roles that I'm going to talk about today. But next, let's talk about what is a compliance officer. Uh, with you don't have to be a coder to be a compliance officer. However, I would be hard pressed to hire a compliance officer if they didn't have some experience as a coder, and I would want them to be certified because the role is going to be looking at the code sets, and we are making sure in compliance that the facilities and the doctors, as well as doctors' offices, but for the most part, usually facilities uh, adhere to the coding and billing regulations. So if you're not a coder, how can you do that? And if you don't know the guidelines, then how can you do a good job as a compliance officer? However, the compliance is much broader than just the code set. They're going to monitor the coding practices. You're going to do internal audits. You're going to implement policy changes, and we're going to look at procedures to ensure compliance with healthcare laws and regulations, such as HIPAA. And most of us, HIPAA is something that we get in all of our coding education. They're going to go into a little more depth. You can actually get certified in HIPAA um, if you choose to do so, but your role as a coder will already have had that education in HIPAA. If you choose to get into compliance, there's some things that you want to think about. One, that there are additional um, credentials, and there's more than one for a compliance officer. If you choose to align yourself with the same organization that you have your coding credential with and get a compliance certification, then one, you're saving money because your dues to that organization is most of the time it doesn't cost more by getting multiple certifications. Sometimes it does, so look into that. And or you may want to align yourself with your keep your medical certification in coding, but align yourself with another organization. And some entities may say that we want you to get, X, Y, or Z certification, as that's the one that we hold with high esteem within our facility or organization. Always do your research. So let's talk about some of the options for compliance officer. There's more than one. Certified Healthcare Compliance is CHC, and it is offered by the Healthcare Compliance Association, or the HCCA. The CHC is a certification that's widely recognized in compliance, and most all of these certifications will cover the same thing, but healthcare compliance, including regulations and risk assessment and ethics. Now, when we say risk assessment, that can have two meanings. One, it can be what I think of in risk adjustment, and it can mean something else like risk assessment in what is the risk in the way the practice is being run. And it can also involve money. Certified Professional in Healthcare Compliance, the CPHC. It's offered by compliancecertification.org, and it is also one strictly for compliance professionals. Healthcare law, regulation, and program management is the themes for it. Now, let me also say a little caveat here. I know of some of these. I do not know in depth about all of them. So I would encourage you to use this as a list, and then break out and do your own research. Look at their website, but don't go by their website alone. You need to check with their members before you make a final decision, as well as if you're working in a particular arena already with your coding credential, and you say, hey, I want to kind of get into compliance, I wanted to look into that. Find out who you're working with, if they have a compliance department, and which credential they prefer, and then do your research from them. The next one is the Certified Compliance and Ethics Professional, the CCEP, offered by Compliance Certification Board, CCB. And that is a certification. It's not specific to healthcare, which is, again, a little bit different, because most of the ones you think of are in our world is healthcare related, but it is acceptable by a lot of the healthcare professionals in the industry, and for healthcare compliance. It's going to do ethics, compliance, program management, and regulatory knowledge. The next one is Certified Professional Compliance Officer, CPCO. It is offered by the AAPC. It's, relatively a newer credential, but it is one that if you already have your credential in medical coding with the AAPC, then you may want to stay within the organization and add that to your credential list. We still have more. Certified in Healthcare Privacy Compliance, CHPC. It's offered by the HCCA, and it focused specifically on healthcare privacy compliance and HIPAA related privacy related regulations. So it's a little bit different than the other compliance that I've talked about. It is privacy compliance. And then we have Certified HIPAA Privacy Security Expert, CHPSE, which, again, I mentioned previously that you can get HIPAA certified. And this is one of the areas, one of the credentials that would do that for you. It's offered by Compliance Certification Board, CCP, and its main focus is HIPAA privacy and security rules. It's also responsible for ensuring compliance with HIPAA regulations. Now, that being said, it may be an additional credential that you want to get in the future. There's no reason why you can't get more specialized within being a compliance officer. That leads us to the next one, Certified Healthcare Research Compliance, CHRC. It's working with healthcare research settings, and it's offered by the HCCA. It looks at human subject protection in research billing. Now we're going to come back to this one in a little bit. Then we have Certified Compliance Professional, the CCP. It's offered by the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, the SCCE. And it's not a healthcare specific credential again, but it is well known by professionals across various industries, including healthcare. Taking a break real quick, I mentioned earlier a podcast. If you're listening to us via our podcast, because that is something that new we've gotten into. The CCO Club now, many of the um, things that you get to see on the CCO Club, you can listen to in our podcast. Go to the cco.us/club to get more information about our wonderful club that I'm so excited to talk about. We have some pretty fabulous people in our club, and we've got exciting questions that come through, and it's fun to see the interaction with the professionals, both new people in the industry as well as people that have been around the block a few times and give insight. Within the CCO club, you're going to get to see full videos like you're seeing now. Many of the webinars that we do, we cut them off. We give you a little taste. We may share them on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, but then we shut them down. And they are exclusive to the CCO Club, where you'll get the full video. You get replays, you get the slides, the slide deck, you get the transcripts, and then we get to also discuss further things that were talked about in the lecture. With the podcast, you only get to listen, but if you hear something that resonates with you or piques your interest, just jump out onto the CCO club and you can have all of those opportunities to flush it out and get more information. So I'm excited to tell you that we do have a podcast, real easy to find. Just look at CCO. Or even medical coding when you sign into the platform that you use for your podcast needs. We're not done with compliance officer. One thing about compliance officers that you need to be aware of is often when you start taking on some of these roles, they want you to have a bachelor's degree. Now, not all of them. Some will say an associate's degree in, say, healthcare information or health information technology or one of the related fields is okay. But when you get into roles like compliance officer, not necessarily a lateral move. That is a step up on the rung of in your career. There is roles, say if you're doing outpatient coding where they need a compliance officer in the office and they may not require you to have a degree and they may not even require you to have a compliance credential. But a lot of times those are roles where you take on another hat and you don't get paid more for it. As you know, we wear many hats. But if you're going to become a compliance officer, say for a health system, then education is going to be important, and a degree, a bachelor's degree, is where you want to start. If you have a degree in healthcare information technology, that's brilliant, but it doesn't have to be in that. I think most of these entities have a standard for employment, and this is like I said, a compliance officer is up there. Experience, usually they want you to have a few years of experience, not necessarily as a compliance officer, but that experience that you have as a coder is going to absolutely be beneficial to you as a compliance officer. Regulatory knowledge, this is absolutely necessary. You need to know HIPAA inside and out. You need to know how the Affordable Care Act works, as well as False Claims Acts, other types of regulations. And these things are somewhat fluid. There's always changes being made. Think, for example, how COVID changed what we do with telehealth, and they were constantly, it seemed like every week there was an update on how you could or could not do telehealth. And then when the pandemic was more or less over, then they extended your ability to do telehealth for patients. And now telehealth's here to stay. It was around before the pandemic, but very wasn't used very often. But now it's another way to offer care to people that may or may not have been able in the before the pandemic to get out. So all of that stuff you need to stay on top of, and it's constantly changing. You do need to have coding expertise. You need to have experience as a coder. You also have to have some analytical skills, because as a compliance officer, you're going to be looking at a lot of data and trends and patterns, looking for errors. You're going to have to be real savvy with reports. Uh, I wouldn't say necessarily. A lot of times when you're working with bigger entities, you may not be called to come up with reports, but you definitely want to be able to tell the department that's going to put the reports together that this is what I need in my report. You can't just say, I want to report on all of our CKD patients that have not been seen in the last 6 months. You have to have a lot of information and data to give the people that pull those reports together. And they'll tell you what they can and cannot do and what the purpose of the report is, and so on and so forth. So again, having that analytical background will be very helpful to you, and you better be able to run Excel spreadsheets. And you can learn that on YouTube now. Documentation is also one of those key areas that you're going to have to excel at. Uh, uh, we're pretty good at it just as coders, right? We have to read documentation. That's what we do. But having that CDI aspect of it is going to be beneficial in for compliance officer. Continuing education is an ongoing thing. Like I said, we're somewhat fluid in what we do. Every year we have new codes that drop, and now twice a year we have ICD codes drop, and which we'd never had that before. And the laws are always changing. Interpersonal skills, because you will be talking to other professionals. You need to have confidence when you talk to providers. You need to have confidence when you go into the billing department, and when you have to communicate with a CEO, maybe, or the even sometimes with patients. All of that is going to be critical for compliance officers. I would not say necessarily that you have to be an extrovert, that you can be an introvert and have that role, but know that there is a level of communication skills that is going to be helpful in uh, in being a very good compliance officer. Organizational skills, absolutely. And most of these things that we're talking about with a compliance officer will go in with the other four roles that I picked. Organizational skills, I can tell you, I am not the most organized person. I do have a way I do things, but I would not say that that is one of my top tier uh, roles, skill sets that I have. Although I can be if I need to be, but my interpersonal skills are off the charts. So again, don't think that if you're not very analytical or you don't have good organizational skills, know that you need to have a uh, working relationship with all of these skills, and you can also improve yourself if your organizational skills are not that good, or your interpersonal skills are not that good. Say maybe you are a person that hasn't had a lot of experience with doctors and other entities in facilities. Just know that there are helpful tools to get you to where you need to be. And there's mentors out there that can help you. All right, now we're ready for number two, healthcare fraud investigator. I got to go to a lecture a few years ago at one of I was speaking at the same time as another person, and the other guest speaker was a healthcare fraud investigator, and her lecture was absolutely fascinating. At that time, I thought, wow, I would love to get into this. Um, I haven't. But if this triggers your interest at all, then I think you should look into it. This is not for somebody that is new as a coder. I would tell you that unless you have extensive background in investigating fraud and abuse, then that might work. If that has been a part of another role that you have played in your past career, I would say then you can. But with healthcare fraud and abuse, you're going to need to know the code sets very, very well. What they do, though, is they investigate suspected healthcare fraud, abuse cases. So that means you have to understand what fraud is and abuse is. And they often are working with government agencies, insurance companies, and there's also private organizations that will hire health fraud investigators. Another arena that I've stepped into is expert witness work. And you, as a healthcare fraud investigator, you might be called to be an expert witness, which is a fun role. Will say I did not add that one to the five for today, which we may talk about that in the near future. What type of credentials or extra certifications you need to get into healthcare fraud investigating work? First of all, again, you need to have that coding background. But if you get the HCCA, that's the Healthcare Compliance Association, and they are with the you're certified in healthcare compliance. They are a broader certification in healthcare compliance. It includes things like fraud investigation and prevention. There is also the ACFE, which is the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. That is the through Certified Fraud Examiners, or CFE. And it's not specific to healthcare, but it's widely recognized for fraud examinations. And it could be maybe one of those areas that you could even venture out a little further and do some fun things. But many of a lot of the people that have the ACFE get into healthcare fraud investigation. There's also the American Board of Professional Liability Attorneys, the AB. PLA. Now, this particular one, you have to be an attorney. And so it's with the LPL, Legal Professional Liability Group, and it's a certification again for just attorneys that specialize in healthcare fraud and professional liability cases. Uh, if that is a role that that you think that you would like, then hey, I'm all for getting more education. But you can also be work for an attorney's office as a medical coder and biller, and morph into organizations. Like I said, if they may be the attorney will have the certification, and then you get one of the other ones and work under them, right? Internal Association of Special Investigations Unit, the IASIU, which sounds like something that you would see on TV. They are that certifications with the CIFI, which is Certified Insurance Fraud Investigator. Uh, it's primarily focused again on insurance fraud, but they do delve into other types of healthcare fraud and with an insurance context. Uh, there is not a lot of in the coding world or coding arena, we don't get a lot of insight from the payer perspective. And so that may be an area that you want to get into from the payer's perspective and work for insurance companies. Certified Healthcare Protection Administrator, CHPA, that's offered by the International Association for Healthcare Security and Safety, which is the IAHSS. That is going to be specific to healthcare security, and it's relevant for professionals involved in fraud prevention and healthcare security roles. Pretty exciting. Julie asked if this will be emailed to them, and no, it will not. Julie, this information is free for you to look at on the platform that you're watching right now, and it's not going to go away, so you can make notes. But if you want this slide deck and the transcript of what we're talking about today, that's the CCO Club, the cco.us/club. And then you'll have all of that. And then you can also have further discussions within that club regarding everything that we're talking about. So if you want to ask questions there about certain certifications and research that maybe I did or some of the other participants in the club, uh, again, it's a fun place to talk. All right, so where did I leave off? Okay, Certified Healthcare Compliance Investigator, CHCI. It is a credential offered by the Compliance Certification Board, the CCB, and it's designed for professionals specializing in healthcare compliance investigations, and they can include fraud-related investigations. Now, keep in mind that if you are looking for a healthcare fraud investigating credential, uh, think about your career goals. And I would say that is really appropriate for all of the ones that I'm talking about today. Some certifications like that CFE, it's pretty broad, and it's applicable for fraud investigations across all kinds of industries, not just the healthcare industry. And then the CHCI, that's more tailored toward healthcare compliance investigations. So again, with these, would you need a degree? Mm, uh, some of them may even require you to have a degree. I'm not sure on all of them. Healthcare fraud investigating is something that I was interested in about, gosh, I want to say 5 years ago when I had and I think that's how far it is now that I got to see that lecture. And she was a lot of fun. She was young and vibrant, which was exciting also, and loved what she was doing, which made me kind of get excited about it. I didn't pursue it anymore, but I did do some investigating at the time, and things probably have changed a little bit. So, uh, again, use this as a launching point, Julia, like you said, or Julie, sorry, that you can go one step further by using this information today and fine tuning. Uh, uh, Fine tuning what you need to get into the industry. I would also check on LinkedIn and see if you can, connect with some people in there. Oh, this is absolutely probably one of my favorite right now, though. Clinical documentation specialist. Now, I have aligned myself with ACETUS, which we'll talk about them, and you do not have to be certified with them to be a member of ACETUS. And they are absolutely one of the leaders in the industry. To get their certification, you do have to have a minimum of a specific uh, many years in the industry, and then you have to have a letter to be able to set for the exam. Now, I'm qualified and I'm going to sit for the exam, but like all of us, when we're going to sit for another credential, it's all about timing and when do I have time to sit for one and so on and so forth. However, I got all my ducks in a row and I'm ready to set for it. I just have to find the time to do it. In the meantime, though, I am still a member of the ACETUS, and ACETUS works not in local chapters like other credentialing organizations do. They go by state. And Missouri, where I live right now, happens to have two chapters, which most states only have one. So in Texas, we only had one, but in Missouri, we have a St. Louis and a Kansas City. And a little sidebar here, guys, is tomorrow I will be going to St. Louis because I'm a co chair with the St. Louis chapter and giving a lecture at their symposium on ICD 11. It's very exciting to see that. But that being said, clinical documentation specialist is going to be very important for the role of a coder in the future, especially as we get into AI and as we transition into ICD 11, which we've done other lectures on that, and we'll continue to update you in what's happening in our industry. Becoming a CDI, CDS, I guess, or CDI, they call it clinical documentation improvement, but it's clinical documentation specialist would be an ideal credential that I would suggest that you get for that role. Let's first, before I get too excited, tell you what they do. They usually combine uh, the role in looking for completeness of documentation, documentation improvement, and there's usually really heavy roles in education, both for coders and billers and providers and clinicians. In the past, a lot of times RNs, clinicians were called to take on these roles because they understood the disease process, they understood the documentation so well, and what was happening in the industry. But that has changed significantly. Do you have to have a degree to be in CDI or be a CDS? No, you don't. If you do, that's fabulous. That's going to also elevate you. But again, as our role is changing, get into CDI or the CDS. It's synonymous, what I'm saying. So education, most of them will say, yes, have a bachelor's degree, and it be healthcare related. But you could primarily they're looking for RNs, and a lot of times it's BSNs, health information management, healthcare administration, any of those related areas. Some employers will say that it's okay to have an associate's degree, and then there's others that will say, well, you don't need a degree to to get the job. But these are being in CDI, you elevate real quickly. And so I would encourage you that if you are going to get a degree, you're thinking about a degree and you're not sure what you wanted to do, those are some of the degrees you might look into. You could get a degree in basket weaving probably and still get in with some of these, but um, clinical experience, that's going to be very, very important. Now, if you've been in risk adjustment, you get to read all kinds of documentation. You can pull a chart if you work for an MA plan that's 1,000 pages of documentation. Most of the time it's fodder. You can't work in risk adjustment with it, but you get to go through it, right? And you build up your knowledge base of what documentation looks like. And when you work for an M&A plan, you're looking at documentation from all kinds of EMR systems, all kinds of specialties. And that really works well, that experience in CDI. The clinical experience, though, that's why they've usually in the past notoriously wanted RNs to take on these roles. You need to be able to read documentation inside and out. That's very, very important. Uh, Now let's talk about the credentials. If you go with the CEDAS, they have the Certified Clinical Documentation Specialist, the CCDS, but they have recently added the CCDSO, which was exclusive for outpatient. I was going to go ahead and get that first because most of my experience is all in outpatient, and now they have that role. As the CCDS, you'd be working inpatient and outpatient. um, Health Information Management or an HIM certification. This is one that AHIMA puts out, and it's well known in the industry. And note that a lot of times CDI training comes from inside the entity that you work for. Um, that is because they will transition an RN and they'll say, "Hey, we're going to make you a CDI or CDI specialist for the particular department and things." So they do a lot of in-house training, although. Uh, they know that just because in the past they've done RNs doesn't mean that your role as a coder and especially and a biller too could not morph you into getting into those CDI trainings. You don't know unless you ask, and the need has been pretty high for CDI people. I would encourage you to look into it if it interests you. Deborah says we need her to speak to our virtual professional practical students. Oh, well, Deborah, you just get a hold of us. Go to cco.us or help desk at cco.us. And you can also reach out in LinkedIn. But I speak a lot for different people, but absolutely go through the help desk and they'll get you in contact with um, how CCO can help you both with education and a guest speaker. Another area, revenue cycle analyst. Now, know that this is the billing side of our world. You've probably heard this. If you're a coder and you get into billing, you're going to be a fabulous biller. If you're a biller and you get into coding, you're going to be a fabulous coder. So having both of those are sisters in the industry, and that really escalates you in your hireability, and you're transferring. A lot of those are lateral jobs. I was shocked when I found out billers made more money than coders. Because well, first of all, I never liked billing very much. I have to tell you though, some of you that have been with CCO for a decade, like I haven't heard me through the years, I really give billing a hard time, but uh, in the last probably 3 years, I've been real active in the billing world, and and I've been around a couple people that love billing. They love billing like I love risk adjustment, and it rubs off. And I've even looked at some revenue cycle type positions on the side to play around and bring my skill set up, but um, I have to admit, it's not as bad as I say it is. But the revenue cycle analyst is different than a medical biller. This would be a level up from that, or two, maybe, they look at the financial aspect of healthcare and the operating of both billing, the coding, the reimbursement process, and their goal is to actually optimize revenue generation and financial performance. And it is not easy. You probably know that hospitals are closing. They hospitals always run in red. They never come out flush. And they work really, really hard to be able to keep their doors open. And it's the people that get into the role of revenue cycle analysts, they're the ones that are kind of in the bounce house trying to make sure that everybody's taken care of. The employees, the providers, that they have enough providers to do the jobs for the community, and the patient. So if this is something that you think you're interested in, it's pretty fascinating. It I've always thought it was kind of a frustrating role. Uh, However, these people have inspired me, and it's fun to hear them talk and some of the things I've gotten involved with them with. I have to admit again that I'm starting to like it a little bit more. So let's talk about some of the certifications. Certified Revenue Cycle Professional, the CRCP, is offered by Healthcare Financial Management Association, the HFMA. It's a revenue cycle professional. It covers all kinds of aspects of revenue cycle management, and that includes patient access, billing, collection, compliance. Now, to get the CRCP, it means that you have a very strong understanding of healthcare financial management. So, if you have an accounting background, brilliant, right? A coding with accounting, uh, that would be just a shoe-in for you. There is Certified Revenue Integrity Professional, or CRIP, CRIP, and that's offered by the HFMA. It also looks at revenue integrity, and it's closely related to revenue cycle analysis. That's why it's on this list. But to ensure services provided to patients are accurately reflected on claims at the hospital receives appropriate reimbursement. So it's a little bit different than the revenue cycle analyst, but it is still right there. I would say you could still lump them together. Then we have, of course, the certified professional biller that the AAPC puts out. This is a great certification to get. And if you're already certified in coding, then I would encourage you to go ahead and pick up the CPB. We do offer education in this credential. So you can come back to us and we'll help you get that one. Certified Revenue Cycle Specialist, the CRCS, and that's offered by the American Medical Billing Association, or AMBA. I would have to tell you that AMBA is brilliant. If I had to pick between the AAPC and AMBA for a billing credential, I would pick AMBA. They blow it out of the water. They're, of course, not as big as the AAPC, but everybody I know that has this credential, they love it, and the exam is hard, but AMBA is a very good organization. So consider looking into them regarding this credential. And they have some other credentials now, I think, but for the most part, they've always been billing industries. A lot of people who want to open billing offices, coding and billing offices, they'll go to AMBA for direction. So I can absolutely say that I vetted them. And our billing course, would set you up to be able to take the certification with AMBA, the CRCS, as well as with the AAPC if you want to. Certified Healthcare for Financial Professional, the CHFP, that's with the FMA, and it's more comprehensive. It covers things like healthcare financial management that gets you into the revenue cycle management. And they're not specifically in revenue cycle analysis, but it's right there in the same thing of healthcare finances. Certified Healthcare Access Manager, CHAM, and that's offered by the National Association of Healthcare Access Management, or NAHM. I don't know if they have a way to say that, but it's NAHAM. They are also healthcare access management, and they are uh, that is a critical component of the revenue cycle. They also are skilled at patient access and registration process. This is a if I remember right, I don't know this one as well, but it is a I think they may be a more of an entry level credential. Look into that and find out for sure. The really don't matters. The credential that's right for you is going to be based on what are your career goals. What experience do you already bring to the table? What uh, do you want to get more education as far as do you want to get a degree? Do you want to get an associate's? Do you want to put the money in there? Most of the time in medical coding and billing, you don't have to have a degree to be able to do these roles. But if you want to get into leadership, supervisory roles, management roles, then you probably do. And or you need to have been in the industry for a while. So keep that in mind as you look at those roles. Next, clinical research coordinator. You may not have realized this was an opportunity for you. I thought it was interesting. I've met a couple people that do this. I have to say their personalities are a little different. These tend to be more introverted people. Doesn't mean you have to be one to do that. It just happens to be the ones that I met were. What they do is they support clinical trials. Now, clinical trials are happening all of the time. I don't know if you guys saw on the news, but Elon Musk just got FDA approval to use the Neuralink on people recently. I mean, it just dropped. So, clinical research coordinator, that's the people that would be in charge of first getting the candidates for the trials and putting all that in together. Erica says clinical research, love this. It is exciting. It is not new. This has been around for a very, very long time. However, we don't talk about it much. It is a role in the industry where you have it location is going to be very, very important. So where do you want to live that has a job opportunity in clinical research? That is going to be wherever there's a teaching hospital. So your universities that have med schools, aligning yourself things with like John Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, those will have clinical research coordinators, and there will be entry levels and moving up within them. It's a lot of data information that you have to pull together. There's financial information that you have to pull together, as well as talking to the patients or the people and getting the people engaged to be part of these research roles. So it's kind of neat. They again support clinical trials, and they coordinate patient recruitment. They do data collection and again regulatory compliance. So see how all of these kind of morph together. You need to know the code sets. You need to understand documentation. You need to understand compliance, and you have to understand the financial world involved. So there are some credentials that you can get for this. Certified Clinical Research Professional, or a CCRP. It's put out by the Society of Clinical Research Associations, or SOCRA, or SOCRI. And it's one of the most recognized that you can go with. It includes the let's see, well, let's jump to be certified. You have to pass the exam, and you have to know about clinical research regulations, ethics, and best practice. So that compliance stuff would play well in this. So maybe you've gotten into compliance and now you want to look into something else. uh, Next we have, let's see, the certified clinical research coordinator, the CCRC. And sometimes some of these credentials and these names of these credentials are first come first serve. So if somebody already has one, then you have to try to figure out what are you going to do for your credential that you're offering. So that let's see, uh, is put out by the Association of Clinical Research Professionals, C or ACRP, and it's designed for the coordinators that work with proficiency in conducting clinical trials, ensuring patient safety, and adhering to ethical and regulatory standards. Uh, Next, clinic or certified research administrator. Now, whenever you hear the word administrator, then it probably has a degree that you have to get. Not always, but that's usually a flag. It's not specifically clinical research coordinators, but it is a research administrator certification council that puts this out, the RACC, and they have to have expertise in research administration and management of research studies. So again, you may not have realized that these were career opportunities for you, but like Erica said, whoo, that sounds exciting. And you probably would never get bored, and you would get to meet some fascinating people, both on the patient side as well as the provider side, all the power players. And think about that, you're on the cusp of new medicine. You could be involved in the Neuralink. Okay, so it's important that, again, always with all of these, what are the job requirements? So look, you can go out and just look. Erica's joining us from LinkedIn. Get on LinkedIn, find out who are clinical research coordinators, right? And then you can also start looking at um, job opportunities. That's the best way to see if you qualify or what you need to be savvy in to get into one of these roles, and then build on that. Uh, but be careful. Some of them may require degrees, some of them may not. But I would suspect if you get into clinical research, um, then you probably do, unless you're going to take a lower role where you're pulling the data and information together, being an assistant. Uh, again, it would still be a stepping stone as you're working on a degree to go along with it. So usually a bachelor's degree is what you're going to need, and then you could possibly they want master's degree uh, with specialized roles. Knowledge of regulations is going to be very, very important. Some of those regulations that you need to be aware of is Good Clinical Practice, GCP, and the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, and that does the governing for clinical research. Computer skills, you're going to be on a computer a lot, and you're going to be doing reports, and not just for the data that's coming in, but also compiling information on the patients that are going to be in these trials. That there is an electronic data capture, or EDC system, that they use. They have some specific systems. Since this is a kind of a niche, they probably have limited software for those areas. And if you're used to one, then you're used to another. But that also means that you have to be familiar with EMR systems as you tap in to people's records and things. Patient recruitment and retention. So not only do you have to most likely help with patient retention and educating people that are thinking about being patients, uh, but keeping their excitement up, also uh, staying engaged with them, and making sure they understand how to get where they need to be, as well as being kind of a patient advocate in some ways. I would say, so that interpersonal skills, you're going to be talking with some pretty you got your patients. You could be with very, very sick patients. I know the Neuralink is going to be tested on people that are quadriplegic. So again, if you don't know about that type of a process, the disease process, or injuries and traumatic injuries, uh, and then a lot of times clinical research is done with people who are really, really sick, and they, don't have positive outcomes. And so they've dedicated what's left of their life to clinical research to see if they can help understand the disease that they're going through. So again, there's a lot of dynamics going on there, and it would probably take a certain personality to work with those. Plus, the people that do this type of research, they're brainiacs, and uh, so again, you got to be comfortable with all kinds of personality types. All right, guys, let's recap. We're on the hour. The 5 ones that I picked for you was compliance officer, healthcare fraud investigator, clinical documentation specialist, revenue cycle analyst, and clinical research coordinator. what you have to ask yourself is the medical certification that you've gotten right now, coding, billing, or one of the other credentials that maybe we teach at CCO is, what do you want to do next? What do do you want to stay in the role that you're at? Or do you want to branch out and see some of these other opportunities that the education that you've gotten in these certifications and your background will lead you into an exciting path that you may not even realize existed? Uh, the I really like that Erica thought, is that new? Or the fraud and abuse may not have realized, and this research coordinator, our roles are always changing. It seems like as a code in coding and billing, not only do our code sets change every year, but the government is always making up rules saying you can or cannot do this. And then you got the payers and their rules saying that you can or cannot do specific things for them. So what Medicare wants, Blue Cross Blue Shield may want something else. And with that, we're used to change. But our role is can be elevated to other opportunities, and I encourage you to look at those. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Again, we've talked about tumor registry and my passion risk adjustment. Know that the best way to find out about these opportunities is to network, and you can do that through the CCO Club. Erica, the replay is available through the CCO Club, cco.us/club, if you want to discuss about it. But this will stay up on YouTube. And I know you've joined us with LinkedIn. Know that you can go to our YouTube channel, Medical Coding Cert, and subscribe there, and you'll always be notified when we offer lectures like this in the future. You guys, it was so much fun to do this for you. And we are driven by the topics that you request. If there's something specific you'd like for us to talk about, it's real easy to let us know. You go to the website, cco.us. /topic hyphen request. And by doing so, you'll let us know how we can stay relevant in your lives. And we'll make sure that we do the research and give you the information you need to maybe make decisions in your coding career, maybe make decisions about credentials that you may or may not want to get into, but we'll also help you network with other people to further your career. We love what we do. Education is what we do for full time, and we are often heard saying learning is fun. And happy learning is how we end a lot of the end of our lectures. We have gotten into provider education, corporate education. We now have our podcast, and you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, as well as going straight to the source, cco.us/club. If you have any questions, know that you can reach out. But in the meantime, keep learning and networking with each other. It was great to talk to you guys, and I am excited to find out what topics you want us to talk about next. Bye, guys.